Welcome back, guys. Kent and I are here to go over some more of the contract. Kent's got a great section talking about how to become a million dollar agent. And if you listened to my show yesterday, you'll know I still have a cough. So I apologize for that now. Kent has said that I have to make a doctor's appointment. I'm not sick. I'm just dying. There's a difference.
Yeah.
With that, we're going to go ahead and get started, guys. I promise we're not going to do the same section a third day in a row. I know you guys want it, but we're not doing it. So I'm going to switch over to the contract here. And Kent, can you see the contract?
Yes, I can.
All right. So, guys, today we're going to be talking about paragraphs 8, 9, 10, going into some of the meat and potatoes, the stuff you're actually going to spend a lot of time dealing with, talking about, working with. Now, paragraph 8 is a merger of paragraphs 8 and 4 from the previous contract. Paragraph 8B is what was always in paragraph 8. Broker's fees and obligations of parties for payments of broker fees are contained in a separate written agreement. This is important. Remember, as real estate professionals, our compensation is not part of this contract. We cannot make stipulations to our compensation a part of the contract for our clients. Our clients deserve a better deal. Our stuff is handled on a completely separate written agreement. And we'll go into the separate written agreement conversation when we get to page 10 and talk about the things on that side. Now, paragraph 8A is talking about the things that was paragraph 4. And I liked it on paragraph 4 being on the first page because I think it's important and I think it's a huge thing to have disclosures. But I wasn't part of the final decision to make the change to move to paragraph 8. Broker or sales agent disclosures. Texas law requires all real estate broker or sales agent who is a party to a transaction or acting on behalf of a spouse, parent, child, business entity in which the broker or sales agent owns more than 10%, or a trust for which the broker or sales agent acts as a trustee, or which the broker or sales agent or broker or sales agent's spouse, parent, child is a beneficiary. To notify the other payment party in writing before entering into a contract of sale, disclose if applicable. This is where you're going to put, if you're purchasing or selling, buyer or seller is aware, buyer or seller is a licensed real estate agent in the state of Texas, active in the real estate industry. You need to disclose, listen, I have more knowledge than you in this. I'm a little bit more knowledgeable than you. I've disclosed it to you. You understand it. It says spouse, parent, child. My opinion, Ken, I'll ask you yours in a second. I don't care if it's your fourth cousin. I would rather over disclose than under disclose. And no one cares if you're selling your cousin's house unless there's an issue and they come back later and say, hey, this is family, you screwed me. As far as I'm concerned, if it's family of any kind, if you have ownership of any kind, disclose, disclose, disclose.
Absolutely. I agree 1,000%. I don't care if it's this paragraph or any other paragraph. If you know something, you tell people.
Yeah, it just, guys,
the neighbor will always tell everybody.
Well, and you know that, I mean, the age-old rule in real estate, we're all friends until we're not friends.
Right.
Nobody would ever do that to you until they do that to you. Yeah. And if you give someone any reason to come back at you, it just makes it so much harder. This is your cousin. Look, I don't have to disclose this is my cousin. I don't care. Just say, hey, just so you know, I'm helping my cousin buy a house. Nobody cares, but it's disclosed, and they can't come back on you later and say, hey, you knew about this. Just, guys, please, 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 please disclose. That's pretty much all that's there. If you're buying a house, if you're selling a house, you as a licensed professional have an advantage over the other party. You have to disclose and let them know, just so you know, I'm smarter in real estate than you are. I've been given training in real estate. I've got an advantage. If they've been disclosed that, come back later and say, hey, you're a realtor. Yeah, I know. I told you that on page 2.
Right.
Oh, or page 5. Oh, yeah, you're right. There's nothing they can do. But if you come back later and you didn't disclose it, there's a world of trouble you're going to get in. So just disclose, disclose, disclose. If in doubt, disclose.
Yeah.
Paragraph 9, closing. This is the magical thing that we have now. The real magic word we have is funding, but we're talking about closing it for the contract. Paragraph 9A, the closing of the sale will be on or before blank, whichever date, or within 7 days after objections made under paragraph 60 have been cured or waived, whichever date is later. When the closing date. If either party fails to close the sale by the closing date, the non-defaulting party may exercise remedies contained in paragraph 15. So you have to disclose, you have to close by that date. Now the problem is This is a contract, a bilateral contract. All parties have agreed to close on this date. Now, the problem is we have a lot of third-party entities that are part of this contract or have to do their job in time. Lenders, I love lenders to death. They make our lives much easier and much harder. A lot of times we'll tell them, guys, we have to close by this date. Okay, cool. We get near to closing. We have to close by this date. Oh, we're not going to close by that date. Then we're wasting our time because the contract ends on that date. This is a hard date that we need to understand unless the buyer has put into effect a date of I will I have made these if the buyer has objected, then it creates a 7-day gap for allowing objections to be cured. But if not, and that's the problem we have a lot of times, we're going to close 3 days later. We can't close 3 days later. And I have seen multiple times where a buyer's ready to close 2 days after closing, and the seller has said, I've moved on,
Right.
Especially in this market. So you need to understand at the beginning of this contract, when you're writing an offer, put a realistic date here because we may not get a second chance later.
Well, and really, I mean, you have to have conversations with your team. So whoever your lender is, whoever your title company is, I mean, you need to have conversations with those people and say, what is a realistic date?
Yes.
Yeah. And I get it. I mean, I understand people are writing stuff in to try to win offers and all that. But, when it comes down to it, the contract is it's the law.
Exactly.
And if we don't do it right from the beginning, then as a listing agent, when you start coming to me on every date in the contract to amend that date, can I amend that date? Eventually I'm like, no, I mean, you gave me the dates. We accepted your contract based upon what you said your client was going to do. Right. Eventually I'm going to say, no, we can't amend it anymore. We're going to move on to one of these other 15 offers that we have laying in line.
Well, absolutely. And more than that, when I'm a listing agent, and Ken, I assume you do the same. Before we accept an offer, I'm calling that lender.
Yeah.
Is this date realistic? And a lot of times I'll hear yes, I'll hear no, and that's going to be a make or break on you getting that deal. The sad truth is with the way the market is today, relationships are so much more important than they were a year ago.
Oh, yeah.
I know that agent. If I know the lender that agent is using, and I can say, listen, I know this agent. They're a good agent. They get stuff closed. That goes a long way in getting that deal accepted. When I've got two deals that are almost identical, I know one agent. I have a good rapport with that agent, and I know they're successful and they're going to get stuff done. Or they're working with and the other one's working with a lender that I've had bad experiences with or I've heard bad things about. Trust me, it weighs on that decision very much.
Absolutely. The other thing too, as a buyer's agent, you should be working with lenders that you know well enough to say, we got this contract, pick the phone up and call that listing agent.
Oh, absolutely.
I mean, and that's, we're going to talk about that later today is sales of contact sport, but it's also, you need to, when you reach out and make the phone call, it's such a different phone call than when they have to reach out and call you.
Oh, absolutely. No, you calling them is a different conversation.
Yeah.
And it's huge. So I guess the key to paragraph 9, more than anything else, is exactly what Ken said, having your team together, making sure that lender's not going to lie to you. If they told you we can close on the 13th, by golly, unless we don't have an appraisal back, which is out of everyone's control, unless there's a blizzard that nobody can control, we're closing on the 13th.
Right.
Paragraph 9B, at closing, seller shall execute and deliver a general warranty deed conveying title of the property to buyer and showing no additional exceptions to those permitted in paragraph 6 and furnish tax statements or certificates showing no delinquent tax on the property. Right here, we're promising a general warranty deed to the buyer. So that's just standard language. Buyer shall pay the sales price in good funds acceptable to the escrow agent. Now, good funds means when having this conversation with your buyer, you have to come to the table with cashier's check or a money wire. They're not going to take a personal check at closing. They're not going to take cash at closing. So understanding that is actual title insurance law. I believe it's procedural rule T47. Seller and buyer shall execute and deliver any notices, statements, certificates, affidavits, releases, loan documents, and other documents reasonably required by the closing of the sale and the issuance of the title policy. So we're just saying we're going to sign everything prior to closing, and there will be no liens, assessments, or security interests against the properties which will not be satisfied out of the sales proceeds unless securing the payment of any loans assumed by the buyer, and assumed loans will not be in default. So this is just saying at closing, you're going to pay me the money. I'm going to pay off all my debts. You're going to get this property free and clear.
Yeah.
You're going to get an owner's policy on the property staying the same.
And so I think it's important that people understand right there too. That's what the title is, actually title insurance. And they're insuring the fact that there's no liens on that property.
They do not insure brick and mortar, they insure ownership.
Right, exactly.
Paragraph 10, huge paragraph. There were a lot of changes in paragraph 10 with the new contract that went into play that I really like. I think they really beefed up paragraph 10 and brought it into the next century with all the electronics that we have to deal with on a daily basis.
Right.
But we need to understand, in paragraph A, there's two ways for possession. And this is huge. And I'll talk about real quick a conversation that I had with one of my agents literally today. Buyer's possession. Seller should deliver to buyer's possession of the property in its present or current condition, ordinary wear and tear, executed blank upon closing and funding, or according to terms of a temporary residential lease form promulgated by TREC or other written lease required by the parties. Any possession by a buyer prior to closing or buyer seller after closing, which is not authorized by a written lease, will establish a tenancy acceptance relationship between the parties, which means you cannot move in early, you cannot stay late unless we have all agreed. Now, normally we're going to see upon closing and funding. Now, this becomes a huge issue, and you need to have that conversation with sellers, because more often than not, sellers, yeah, well, as soon as we close, we'll move out. No, you have to move out prior to closing, because at closing, you don't own the house anymore. You're not going to stay for 3 more days moving out. You've got to be out. You've got to have somewhere else. Well, I can't move out till I have my money. That's a problem. And we need to have that conversation in plenty of time. So upon closing and funding means pretty much we've got to assume we're table funding this deal, because we've already talked about in past conversations, we're going to do a walkthrough prior to closing. My only time to put the seller's feet to the fire to make sure that property's in great shape is when I do my walkthrough and say, I'm not going to the closing table until you've corrected these issues. It's filthy, it's dirty, you took the light bulbs, whatever it is, we need to make sure we're ready to accept that property, because at closing, your buyer is going to sign the form that says, I accept this property in its current condition. So you need to make sure you actually accept that property in its current condition. So the seller has to have moved out and the buyer has to be ready to be able to move in. Now,
And sign the buyer walkthrough form.
Sorry, but couldn't.
Sign the buyer walkthrough form. Make sure everybody sees it and signs off on it.
Now, remember it says upon closing and funding. It is not your house until funds have been cleared. So if it's Friday at 4 o'clock when you're closing, assume you're not getting keys till Monday. And have that conversation very often and in advance, saying just because we close doesn't mean we're getting keys that day. And if that day's a Friday, we may not get them till Monday, because that becomes a huge nightmare later. We've got to make sure the title company has all the paperwork. They've given it to the lender. The lender has signed off on everything and sent the wire in. You don't get your keys till the seller gets their check.
Yeah, that paragraph right there, we consider a commissionectomy. That's where
very much so.
Yeah, so I try my very best to never close on Friday. That's just I want to close any day other than Friday. It's perfectly fine with me. If I close on Friday, by God, it needs to be before noon.
Yeah.
Right? And so, but I try not to do it at all. But here's the thing: is when your client, your buyers, got all their stuff packed up in the U-Haul and they're sitting out in front and they can't get their keys. Guess who's paying for the next 2 days of the U-Haul, and guess who's paying for the hotel room? It always seems to come back to the poor real estate agent. Right?
Well, so, this is where remember we talked about is so much easier than, oh yeah, I forgot to tell you.
Yeah.
If I've told you 6 times you're not getting keys today and you come up, oh, I didn't know, you knew, we both know you knew. Now, we've talked about this. Anytime it's bold, it's important. Consult your insurance agent prior to change of ownership and possession, because insurance coverage may be limited or terminated. The absence of a written lease or appropriate insurance coverage may expose the parties to economic loss. Now, we're going to do, I'm sure we're going to do a day where we talk about the seller's temporary residential lease and the buyer's temporary residential lease.
Mhm.
But what you need to understand, possession takes effect on those dates. If the seller stays in a temporary residential lease, the owner owns the home and is acting as a landlord for the seller. So if anything breaks while the seller's in there, the owner has to fix for the seller.
Right.
And vice versa. This happened to us today. A buyer's temporary residential lease, the buyer moves in early, they haven't taken possession of that property. So if anything breaks, it's their problem. We have a temporary residential lease. My number one rule is no temporary residential leases. Any at all possible. Unfortunately, sometimes sellers don't take our advice, buyers don't take our advice, and they play the game. Sometimes they're necessary, but do everything you can to avoid them. It just makes life a whole lot easier. We have a temporary residential lease where we're representing the seller. Buyer calls and says, "Hey, this is broken." Yeah, that sucks.
Yeah.
Well, you need to fix it. No, we don't. You're responsible now. It's your house.
Well, and the other thing is you never want to let a buyer move into a home until you're funded.
Because you're always going to find little things you didn't notice when you move into a house. No house is perfect if it's brand new or 100 years old. There's always going to be little things they're going to see.
Here's a little thing that happened to us one time was somebody decided to let the buyer move into the house early, right? And next thing you know, we call in to find out whether or not they have proof of employment, and they no longer have a job.
Oof. And they didn't want to move.
Yeah, and they already live in your house that you haven't been paid for.
Yeah.
That's a bad day.
Now, paragraph 10B is new to the newest update that just went into effect on April 1st. I love paragraph 10B. I think it is fantastic. I think it does a great job discussing the issues that we need to remember and the stuff that you need to say, oh, yeah, this is something that's huge. Smart devices. Smart device means a device that connects to the internet to enable remote use, monitoring, and management of the property, items identified in any non-realty items addendum, items of a fixture lease assigned to buyer. At the time seller delivers possession of the property to buyer, seller shall deliver to buyer written information containing all access codes, usernames, passwords, and applications buyer will need to access, operate, manage, and control the smart devices, and terminate and remove all access and connections to the improvements and accessories from any of the seller's personal devices, included but not limited to phones and computers. Guys, in this age, it's terrifying. Light bulbs, TVs, all these things are connected to smartphones. You could be sitting at your house and all of a sudden someone else has the ability to turn your lights on and off. Someone else has the ability to turn your TV on and off. Someone else has the ability to access any recording devices that are in the home that you may or may not be aware of. You got to make sure when you're working with your seller to say, listen, change all the passwords to password or 000. I don't care what. I don't want them to know your password. Make it an easy password. Get it off your device. Let's give it to the buyer and let them change the passwords to whatever they want it to be. And the same thing when you go to with your buyers, listen, you need to change the passwords and get it back to factory settings, whatever you need to do to make sure no one else has access to these items, because it is crazy. I mean, the fact that we have light bulbs that are now smartphone light bulbs, it's crazy.
Yeah. They
are. My mother, who's in her 70s, can say, Google, Alexis, turn on light bulbs, and they turn on. It's cool. It's interesting. But the problem is when we move, are we changing those light bulbs out? Are we not? How is that working? Are you allowed to? It gets really tough. And all those conversations come into play. But this allows us to have a conversation with both the seller and the buyer saying, listen, let's get those passwords. Let's know what they are. Change the password to something simple. I don't want you to give them your mother's maiden name or whatever password you're using, but we need to give them access to their home and their keys and all the things that are there. Paragraph 11 is probably the easiest one to talk about because we don't ever write anything in paragraph 11. If you feel the need to write something in paragraph 11, don't. If you still have to do it, get with your broker and have your broker figure out what they need to do and how they need to do it. Paragraph 11 when I first got into real estate in 2005 on the sales side, it was a huge block, and it took up about a third of the page, and it's now shrunk down to what you see, what it is there. And I think that is still way too big. Yeah. Paragraph 11 gives too much ability for someone to write legalese and break the law.
Yeah.
The words on it are insert only factual statements and business details applicable to the sale. Trek rules prohibit license holders from adding factual statements or business details for which a contract, addendum, lease, or other form has been promulgated by Trek for mandatory use, which means even if you say something factual, a part of this contract, and there's an addendum for it, you just broke the Texas Real Estate Commission rules, and you can get in trouble. Do not ever, 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 ever write in paragraph 11. I don't know how else to explain it. Kent, do you have anything else?
I think where people drop the ball is they don't understand the contract addendums or leases or other forms promulgated by Trek.
Mm-hmm.
When you know the other forms exist, then just use the form.
And that's the thing. If you don't know that form exists and you write it there, you just broke the rules.
Right.
And if you start putting in there, furniture to convey, there's a form for that. If you start putting in there, seller's going to stay in the home for 10 days, there's a form for that. So don't be doing that. And just, if you feel the need that you need to write something in there, get with your broker before you even think about writing anything in there.
The thing, Andrew, that they need to really think about is that they're probably not going to run into a situation that hasn't already happened.
True.
So if it's already happened, then there's probably already been a form written for it.
Yes.
So unless it's just some crazy off the wall thing, which we normally never get, if you don't know if there's a form, just ask somebody the question. Is there a form that covers this?
Absolutely. So and even then, never ever write in there without having to first talk to your broker. Because I have a simple belief as a broker. If you do something on your own, we're gonna have a problem. If you tell me to do, if I tell you you're okay to do something and we're wrong, well, that's on me.
Right.
And it's 100% my fault, my problem. Right. So just always go to your broker in those situations and make sure what you can do and cannot.
Well, I think that's a good place to just really touch base a second on agency law and how that works, is the fact that whether you tell your broker you wrote that in there or not, he's still responsible.
Yes.
I mean, and there's nothing that you ever want to do is then have to walk in the door and go, oh, by the way, Andrew.
Funny story.
Yeah, we might have a problem.
And this is a funny story. I bought a bike from Trek, the company Trek Bikes, amazing bikes. Somebody stole it from me. It's a whole nother story. But about a month after I bought it, I was sitting in my office and I got a call. I was like, hey, this is Tony from Trek. I almost crapped my pants because the last thing any broker wants to hear is, hey, this is so-and-so from Trek. And about 5 minutes in, I realized, oh, he's talking about my bicycle. I was like, dude, don't do that again, man. Don't just say bicycle or something. You can't just start with Trek. You gave me a coronary.
Yeah.
Because as a real estate broker, if you hear Trek never calls and says, hey, I hope everything's going well. They're going to call you if there's an issue.
I was just thinking about you, Andrew. Thought I'd give you a
call. And this is a funny side note. Trek sent out 130,000 emails or something to that effect. I could be wrong on the number. Yeah. Every broker who has a corporation, their license was expired by Trek. So I received an email saying, just so you know, your license is expired and you now have no right to work. What's going on?
Yeah, that's great.
It was terrifying, but we got it fixed and it was resolved. And luckily, I know a couple people at the Texas Real Estate Commission. I was making a phone call like, no, it's fine. Don't worry about it. You're good. But it's scary. We're going to go over paragraph 12. Might pull off paragraph 13 today, and then we're going to stop and go into Kent's side. Paragraph 12, paragraph 12A, 12AB, 12A1B is a huge paragraph. But right now we're talking about expenses. Who pays for what expenses? This paragraph 2 years ago in El Paso, Texas, I'd say 90% of deals had a number in paragraph 12A1B. Mm-hmm. I'd say 1 in 20 right now does.
Right. Yeah, I'd agree with that.
You're seeing it extremely less, and it just depends on the market. And the problem with the current market is experience is not your friend in this market. What made sense a year ago and for the last 30 years doesn't make sense today. Mm-hmm. And it's crazy and it's terrifying, and we need to understand that. Expenses payable by seller. And this is going over the list of normal seller expenses. releases of existing liens, including prepayment penalties and recording fees, release of seller's loan liability, tax statements or certificates, preparation of deeds, 1/2 of the escrow fee and other expenses payable by seller under the contract. Sellers shall pay an amount not to exceed blank to be applied to the following order: buyer's expenses, which buyers are prohibited from paying by FHA, VA, Texas Veterans Land Board, or other government loan programs, and then to other buyer expenses as allowed by lender. Now, these are the other expenses payable by buyer in most cases: appraisal fees, loan application fees, origination charges, credit reports, preparation of loan documents, interest of the notes from date of disbursement to 1 month prior to dates of the first monthly payment, recording fees, copies of easements and restrictions, loan title policies with endorsements required by lender, loan-related inspection fees, photos, amortization schedules, 1/2 of the escrow fee, all prepaid items, including required premiums for flood and hazard insurance, reserve deposits for insurance, ad valorem taxes, special government assessments, final compliance inspections, courier fees, repair inspections, underwriting fees, wire transfer fees, expenses incident to any loan, private mortgage insurance premiums, PMI, VA loan funding fee, or FHA mortgage insurance premium, MIP, as required by the lender, and any other expenses payable by buyer under this contract. So what they're going to say is, listen, I want to buy your home, but I cannot afford all of my closing costs. So I want you to pay $1, $2, $3, $4, $5, $6, $7, $8,000 towards closing costs, whatever number you put in there. If you guys look on there, there is a money sign already included. Don't put 3%. That's not a number. You have to, if it's going to be 3% of the sales price or 3% of the loan amount, do the math and put the number in that figure. Right now in our current market, it's going to hurt you if you're putting a money number in there unless you're going way over asking price. And even then, the worry is if it doesn't appraise. So the issue I've got as a listing agent, I'll explain it real quick. Right now in our current market, I agree to give you, let's just use simple round numbers, $5,000 towards closing costs, and you're offering $10,000 over asking. That's great, but what happens if we don't appraise? You're going to want me to lower the sales price by whatever amount that is, but you're still going to want that $5,000 towards closing costs. So for me, I'm looking at this as I might be getting $5,000 more, but I might also not get a dime more if it doesn't appraise, and I'm still on the hook for $5,000. So right now in our current market, as I said, right now about 1 in 20, we're seeing people even asking for closing costs, and that's the reason. Sellers are saying, listen, if this doesn't appraise, you're still going to want this money. Anything to add on that, Kim?
Yeah. So what I would say here is that whenever I get a contract in, when I'm the listing agent, the first thing I look at is what did they offer me on page 1, right? Then the very next thing, I flip straight over to paragraph 12 and see if they put anything there. Absolutely. Because that's the difference. I mean, you may have offered me 10,000 over, but if you asked me for 7,000 in closing costs, you really only offered me 3,000 over. You know? And so I need to know that right off. And I see so many newer listing agents that don't understand the little intricacies of the contract and where you can get bit, you know, and this is a place you can get bit hard. If you don't go pay attention to it and understand and be able to explain it to your seller, is that, yes, I understand that they said they're going to offer you 10,000 over, but they're also asking you for 7,000 in closing. So the simple math is it's only 3,000. You know?
I will say the biggest issue I'm seeing today, because we're no longer asking for closing costs, is there's a disconnect with the sellers, because we're saying, hey, they said no closing costs. No, they said you're not paying their closing costs.
Right.
You still have to pay closing costs.
Right.
And I think that's where the biggest disconnect is, where we still have to explain to our clients, listen, this buyer is not asking you to pay any of their closing costs. Right. But you still have to, there's still a lot of people who have to work and get paid, and nobody works for free. So I think that's something that I think a lot of agents are kind of dropping the ball in a little bit of saying, hey, no closing costs doesn't mean you get, this is a net deal for you. You still got prorated taxes, you still got commissions, you still got title fees that you're going to be responsible for. And I think that is a misunderstanding that we're seeing a lot, is sellers are hearing no closing costs and thinking, I'm good. Now, I have seen one deal where it was cash, buyer pays all closing costs for buyer and seller with the exception of commissions and taxes. And I was like, well, that's a game changer. That's pretty nice.
Right.
So
at this point in time, when you receive that contract, you should be handing them a net sheet with this.
Absolutely.
Yeah. If you put a net sheet in there, then and have them initial it. I like everybody to initial everything we look at. Just so when later on when they come back and say, well, Andrew, you didn't tell me. I go, well, you initialed it.
We have a title company, Hasso, that has it's an astounding app. And it really, what I love the most about it, it actually has a comparison sheet where you can actually compare multiple offers at the same time and be able to say, this offer, you're going to get this offer, you're going to get this. And so you can print the whole thing out, have them see it, and it just really, it makes it a lot easier to present offers to your client with that. I don't want to use names because I don't want to get anyone mad at me, but it is, and a lot of them have some really cool tools and things. But that is it really makes it beneficial because they can say, look, this one, even though it's more, they're asking for this, you're netting this, and this one, even though it's less, they're not asking for as much here, so you're netting this. And that's where what you were talking about, where the little small things that can add up, if they're asking for a little bit, they're offering a little bit less, but they're paying for their own title policy, or they're doing this or that different. So you're actually going to make more money when it's all said and done.
Yeah. Sales price doesn't mean that's what you're going to get.
Absolutely.
But
now, paragraph 12B, if any expense exceeds an amount expressly stated in this contract for such expenses to be paid by a party, that party may terminate this contract unless the other party agrees to pay such excess. Buyer may not pay charges and fees expressly prohibited by FHA, VA, Texas Federal Land Board, or other government loan program regulations. Prorations, we're just going to get into this, and then we're going to stop on the contract for the day. Prorations, real quick, guys. Taxes are paid in arrears, which means our 2021 taxes aren't even out yet. We don't even know what they're going to be. Government bodies have not yet met to do their budgets to tell us what they're going to be at. So we're going assuming last year's taxes. So taxes for the current year, interest, maintenance fees, assessments, dues, and rents will be prorated through the closing date. The tax proration may be calculated taking into consideration any change in the exemptions that will affect the current year's taxes. If taxes for the current year vary from the amount prorated at closing, parties shall adjust the prorations when tax statements for the current year are available. If taxes are not paid at or prior to closing, buyers shall pay taxes for the current year. So you're going to be, the buyers are responsible for taxes at the end of the year, and we're going to have to do it. Now, they say you can go back and fight it out with the seller. The chances of pulling that off are difficult because the sellers are gone. But they will prorate as much as they can, and the seller will be responsible for giving you taxes from January 1st through date of closing in the closing disclosure and that form. We good there, Kent?
I agree. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And I think taxes, you got to be careful too. I would assume that that in El Paso is similar to the way it is in northern Ellis County here. So we run into some larger pieces of land, maybe 7, 10, 12 acres, and they may have been ag exempt for the guy that had them before them, and they're not now. And if you run into that, guys, or if you're in anything that's bigger than a couple acres, before you get too far down the road, go talk to your broker, because there may be some rollback taxes and things in there that can be really, really ugly. And so you want to make sure that everybody has a good understanding of what's going on with the taxes, so that it doesn't come back and bite you in the long run.
What we see a lot is a big frustration for buyers is we have a very large veteran community here, retired veterans, which is fantastic.
Oh, yeah.
But we have it where if you are 100%, if you have 100% VA, you don't pay property taxes.
Right. Yeah.
If you sell your home, the buyer is responsible for the entire year. So that's kind of, and they can't go after the seller because they don't owe taxes. So that one becomes a real sticking point a lot of times. Yeah. I sold one recently where both the buyer and the seller were 100%, and they're like, "Oh, this is new. We haven't seen this one yet." Wow. But it's one of those things that can be really tricky, where people are like, "Well, we can't go after the seller because he doesn't owe taxes, but you will, and you'll have to pay the whole year." And it's like, what? So that's one where we do definitely see some heartache come up at closings, and something you got to be aware of and handle.
That, and what that made me think of while you were talking about that is how important it is for agents. I don't care how long you've been in the business, to spend time in trainings, because if you didn't pick up anything else from this entire training, and you pick that up and you just saved your client, 10, 20,000 bucks. You talk about people love you. Those people are going to love you.
Oh yeah. If you've got someone who's 100% who's renting and be like, hey, if you buy a house, you can save $800-900 a month just because you don't have to pay property taxes. It's a game changer. Absolutely. And it changes the house you can buy. So
see, that's the big thing is that, people don't buy houses based upon what the sales price is. They buy houses based upon what they can afford on a monthly basis.
Absolutely.
And if you adjust the monthly basis, that's what adjusts the size and the type of property that they can live in.
Absolutely.
That's a big deal, guy. You got to understand that, and it makes all the simple understanding of the fact that nobody really cares what the sales price is. They want to know, what does it cost me every month? Right. And if I can afford that's all the lender cares about. The lender doesn't care how much the house is, just cares whether you and I can afford to pay that much every month.
Exactly.
And so the mindset, so we talked a little bit about last week about, learning how to practice more than you play, right? Things like that. Well, this is I was in a conversation yesterday with a gentleman, and it was 100% about what's the difference between an agent and a professional salesperson, right? Okay, so an agent is somebody that passed the test, and Trek says you now have a license to sell real estate. Okay, there's thousands of those people out there, thousands of them, right? A professional salesperson is somebody that has done that same thing, but then has educated themselves in the art of what we do for a daily basis, right? What do we do every day? What is the art of what we do, right? And the art of selling real estate, and I think the word sales gets such a bad rap. I mean, when people hear the word, oh, he's a salesman, well, first thing pops into their mind is maybe some guy trying to sell you a used car that they don't know whether it got banged up or not, right? And that's just not the case. A sales professional is somebody that understands this contract, that understands the rules of engagement when we go in and we negotiate, right? And where we're going to go with that, and understand that I have a fiduciary responsibility to my client to make sure that they're taken care of, right? And so those are that's the art of becoming a professional salesperson is very, very important. If you're not taking time on a regular basis to train yourself, then, and I'm not, and here's, I'm gonna get on the soapbox for a minute. I know what's gonna happen, right? It happens to me every once in a while. My soapbox today is there's a huge difference between reading a self-help book to make me feel better and reading something that makes me a professional salesperson. Okay, those are two completely different things. Now, do I believe in them both? Absolutely. I think you need to put good stuff in that makes you feel good and learn and be positive in your attitude of life and things that are going on. But I also believe you need to go out there and you have to learn the skill sets it takes to become the person that can move a contract from one place to the next till we get it done. Right. So you think about it. What is our job? Okay, our job number one, first and foremost, is to generate a lead. Until we generate a lead, there's nothing else to do. Okay, I don't care how good you are. So first and foremost, our necessity every day is to generate a lead. All right. The second thing is once we get that lead generated, we need to figure out how to determine what is the need of that client. Okay. All right. So that's a sales technique. Right? So if I'm sitting there and I'm talking to Andrew and he says, I want a 3-bedroom, 2-bath, 2-car garage home. Well, my gut feeling, I don't live in El Paso, but my gut feeling is that's most every house there.
A lot of them.
So I really don't know any more than I knew when he walked in the door. Right. So I've got to dig deeper and deeper and deeper on that. I've got to go, okay, explain to me, why do you need three bedrooms? Well, Kent, we got 2 kids and, then I got to go, okay, is it 2? Are you done with 2 or are you going to have enough? What's the next step? What's the thought process? Why did you pick that house? Is it the school district? Is it, what is there a park across there? What is the reason that you want to move forward? So I'm going to dig deeper and deeper and deeper so that I can figure out what it is that Andrew and his family really need and really want rather than just say, oh, let's go look at the 400 3-bedroom, 2-bath house that are for sale in El Paso, Texas. Right? Yeah.
I wish.
Yeah, maybe someday.
But, on top of that, going back to what you said earlier about the sales price.
Yeah.
So often, the issue we have is people, they get a qualifying letter that says they can buy a house for $310,000. They want to go look at a $310,000 house. I was like, guys, hold on. I don't care what you qualify for. I mean, it's important, but it's not that important. What are you comfortable paying a month? That's what I want to know. What are you paying now, and how much more can you go? And I can always go up. I can never go down. I'm not looking at a $300,000 house with you, because realistically, you're not buying a $300,000 house. Because if you buy if you buy at the very top of what you qualify for, you're going to be broke. Right. And we need to have that understanding and knowledge. Say, okay, we go look at $300,000 houses. Okay, well, your payment's going to be this. Well, I can't afford that. I know. That's why I said from the beginning, what can you qualify for? If you're paying $1,000 a month now, let's go start looking at homes that are going to cost roughly $1,000. And then we can go higher with the knowledge that every time we go higher, it's going to cost so much more a month. And with that, it's a game changer in making sure you're proving two things. One, you're not in it just to get the money, because you're not trying to sell them the biggest house on the market that they can afford. Mm-hmm. And two, they're going to be happy and they're going to either call you again, or they're going to refer business to you, because you're not out to screw them.
Well, it goes back to the very first conversation that you and I had when we started doing this is, what do people really want to know? They want to know, can I trust you? Are you good at your job? And do you care about me? And that little statement that you just made put all three of those things together. Absolutely. That's the reality of it, And so, you can make such a good living doing what we do, guys. I mean, you can, but it can't be about that. It has to be about your professionalism to your people, right? And I know I said this last week, and I'll say it again. I'll say it 1,000,000 times before you run me off or quit listening to me, whichever one comes first, right? But the reality of it is that if I'm going to show my mom, and I'm going to do a list, I'm bringing her the whole shebang. I'm dressing, I'm building the presentation, I'm doing it because I want her to go tell her friends when they're sitting around playing bridge or doing dominoes or whatever they do, right, is that she won't say, can I trust you? Are you good at your job? You care about me? But she's going to say those three things to those people that are there. You won't believe when my son listed my house, he came dressed, he came with the full present. He had the listing. All he had to do was just put the sign in the yard, but I'm not going to do that because our number one goal in life is to generate a lead. All right. And I'm looking to generate a lead from every single person. Right. Now, and I do that with intention. Right. But I do it in a manner that makes them feel comfortable about it. And they do it because they trust me. Right. You're not, if you don't trust me, you're not going to tell your mom to call me. I mean, let's just make that real clear, And so we got to get to that point where we become so professional in the things that we do that everybody understands that, that they can trust you and that you do care about them, right? So stay professional, study this stuff, guys. There's tons of books out there on sales technique. Okay. I don't think you should try to get too wordy with stuff. I don't really like scripts, but I always start most of the things I've learned how to do with some type of script and then make it my own. I mean, if I'm going to ask Andrew for, one of my favorite ones, what we call the Mayor campaign, right? And I don't know if y'all use that out there or not, Andrew, but I love it. It's my favorite one. It says, hey, Andrew, if you were looking to buy or sell real estate, or you had a friend or family member that was, do you have a realtor you'd refer them to? Okay. Yeah. And all I want to know is yes or no. If he says, well, yeah, I'd refer him to my brother, then okay, then I'm like, well, great. Nice to know you. I'm moving on, right? Yeah. If he says, no, I really don't, say, well, great. What do I need to do to be that real estate agent for you? Okay. And that's just simple dialogue, right? I didn't think that up. Somewhere at some Brian Buffini deal or somewhere somebody handed me that script and I read it and went, that's pretty cool. I like that. Right. And then I made it my own. And so that's what I'm talking about. When I'm talking about you got to go out there and do some practice and get to be a part of this thing, is you got to go out there and you got to find those little pieces of information that are going to help you. If you're not listening to some of these guys out there, the Buffini's and the Ferries and the guys that are doing this, I'm not saying that you need to do it. Jared James, if y'all know who Jared James is, you need
He's good. He's a younger agent that's really just killing it.
Yeah. So be sure that you're, they're all doing podcasts. They're all doing stuff on a regular. I'm not saying go spend a ton of money. Don't misunderstand what I'm saying to you. What I am saying to you is that you have to take time in your week, and you need to schedule time in your week for you to get better at what you do. Okay. I know not all of you are golfers or anything like that, but there's a really cool commercial out there right now where it talks about every golfer believes there's a better golfer inside him. Right. And I believe that to be true. And I believe that to be true about a real estate agent too. And every real estate agent out there, there's a better real estate agent inside you if you're willing to do the work to get there.
Right. This is kind of on point with my wife is working to become a principal. So she's a teacher now. And she listens to this this guy, and he's kind of a motivational speaker for teachers, and he said something, and it's so perfect for everything, and I kind of stole it for real estate. And his answer was, if you are not, and I'll take it to what it needs to be for this. If you are not the agent that you would want to have, what do you need to do to change that? And what do you need to do to be that person? I take it on a personal level. If I'm trying to go join a real estate company, if I'm not the company I want to join, then I need to change something. I need to do something different. Hopefully, we offer trainings, we offer different things, we do what we can. We're always changing stuff, trying to do what we can do. But the truth is there. If you can have a true gut check moment with yourself and say, if I needed to list my house tomorrow, would I choose me? And if the answer is no, what are you going to do to make it be yes?
Right. I agree. It always amazed me every year when we had the really big office. We do we do peer awards, right? And one of the peer awards was the agent's agent. And it's what agent in the office would you pick to sell your house? And it always amazed me. I'm like, I thought everybody would vote for themselves, but they never did. I mean, there was, and I swear 5 years in a row, same agent won it every time. And, and when that's the case, I'm thinking just what you said. If you're going to vote for that agent, then why are you not following that agent around trying to figure out what they're doing?
The issue with that, and we've seen it, when Brian was in our office and different things, it's so much easier to blame someone. No one is the villain in their own story. I would be amazing except for someone stealing my leads. I would be amazing except for we're not getting enough calls. I would be amazing except for, when at the end of the day, you need to do that. 50 miles on a briefcase makes you a professional and an expert.
An expert, yeah.
When Brian would go to Houston or Dallas or Midlothian or wherever to speak, there'd be tons of people sitting there listening, going, "Oh my gosh, it's amazing." But when you put on a class in El Paso, it'd be like, "Whatever, dude, you're Brian. I don't care."
Yeah.
It's one of those things where it's absolutely true. It's for me, it's my favorite saying, but it's hard to say. Familiarity breeds contempt.
Right. Absolutely.
I see it every day. I hear you every day. Yeah. It's white noise. When I go teach at the Real Estate Academy or talk to the people are like, "Oh man, that's such great information."
Yeah.
I say this all the time, and and it's those things where it becomes white noise almost in that regard.
Yeah, and unfortunately, that's just human nature. We when we're around people on a regular basis, we take them for granted, and unfortunately, we all do that, and I'm just as guilty of it as anybody else. And so but if we make it our intention on a weekly basis to set time aside to train ourselves to be better, be better, go back to what we talked about last week. There's not a football team out there. There's not a professional band out there. There's not anybody out there that does something on that level that doesn't practice more than they play. I mean, that's just the reality of it. I mean, you think about professional dancers. I mean, they all spend more time perfecting the art than they do performing the art, right? And that's what we have to get that mindset, right? If we're gonna be the best we can be. And here's the other thing I know about real estate agents, and this is my is that we all have different desires and different reasons that we're in real estate. I've got some agents that the only reason they want to sell 5 or 6 deals a year so they can take 2 cruises a year and life's happy because they're getting some pension from somewhere, right? And that's okay. I don't have an issue with that. But if you're going to sell 5 or 10 deals, be the best agent you can be at selling those 5 or 10 deals, right? If you want to be Brian Birds and do 400 deals a year, all right, I'm going to tell you, one, you better start getting up a little earlier in the morning. And number 2, you better start learning something because it doesn't come without the sacrifices it takes to be better at that, right? I mean, that's the reality of it. So I want to just really touch base briefly. We're going pretty long here today, but I want to touch briefly on the fact that you got to understand that sales, one of the fundamental things you got to know about being a salesperson is sales is a contact sport, okay? And you have to initiate the contact. Right. And people misunderstand that. They think in today's society and the technology that's available that you can go put a website up or build an app or do whatever and life's going to just be, all roses. That's not how this thing works, guys. Even though you generated the lead, and it may have come from a website or an app or a television commercial or wherever it is. Once that lead's been generated, it's now time for you to start contact. And you have got to go into systems that make you contact on a regular basis and keep those. The number one complaint to the National Association of Realtors about real estate agents is my agent does not communicate with me. Okay.
Number one complaint as a broker as well.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, I got more phone calls about they won't return my phone call. They won't return my phone call. Right? You got to learn. You got to learn to stay in communication. I just had this conversation with my daughter this week. We're dealing with somebody, and they were like, she was like, they went radio silent on me. Dad, what do I do? I said, we continue to communicate. Okay. We tend to, and we track our communications to make sure that we know that it was communicated, right? I mean, sometimes you'll be out there and you'll have 5, 6, 7 deals going on, and poor Andrew will get a phone call that, Kent just says he's not calling me back. And I'm like, I just talked to him. And then you go back and look at where you've tracked all your information and go, oh crap, it's been 2 weeks, but because you had so much going on, you thought, you're like, I just talked to him yesterday. But it really wasn't, right? So you got to learn that. You got to learn that simple skill of contact. Okay, sales, and just put it in your head. Sales is a contact sport. Okay, all right. So everything we do through this process is a contact sport. We have got to stay in contact with our people, and that then at the end of the day, when they go and they talk to somebody at the water cooler tomorrow, because remember, the best time to ever get a lead from somebody is when they're in the middle of a transaction because they're thinking about real estate. Is that, can I trust you? Are you good at your job? And do you care about me? Okay. And if you'll remember those 3 things and stay in contact with them throughout the whole process and afterwards, I mean, nothing breaks my heart more than to be sitting in the office and somebody walk in and go, I want to list my house. I'm like, okay, great. Who sold you your house? And they're like, I don't remember their name. I'm like, you've got to be kidding me. You went through the mud and the blood and the guts with these people and you didn't stay in contact with them. And they've got a house that they bought in Midlothian, Texas 8 years ago for $100,000. It's now worth $600,000. It's like, what are you thinking, right? And so stay in contact, guys. Calls, notes, Popeyes, items of value, send emails, send text messages, love on your people. And if you love on your people, they'll love on you, and you will be where you want to be in this real estate business. So,
absolutely.
With that.
All right, guys, thank you so much. We'll see you next week.
Have a good week, guys.